Hello and welcome to a new episode of Interpreting India. From geopolitical complexities to economic uncertainties, India faces critical challenges in its quest for a more prominent role on the world stage. This season, we at Carnegie India continue to bring voices from India and around the world to examine the role of technology, the economy, and international security in shaping India's future. I am Nidhi Singh, Senior Research Analyst at Carnegie India. We've all heard the hype about AI transforming everything from healthcare to agriculture, but here's what's actually happening on the ground. Governments pilot an AI system, it looks impressive in the demo, and then nothing. Staff keep using old process, supervisors don't trust it. The breakthrough becomes a side screen that nobody touches. This gap between AI pilots and actual adoption is one of the most critical challenges facing countries like India as they seek to leverage AI for development at scale. Joining us today to discuss this topic is Shalini Kapoor, Chief Strategist for Data and AI at the EkStep Foundation, and Tanvi Lall, Director for Strategy at People+ai. Together, they have studied this gap across over 1,000 use cases in 25 countries and developed the use case adoption framework. This is a practical roadmap for moving AI from impressive demos to actual impact at population scale. As India prepares to host the first major global AI summit in the Global South, their work offers critical insights into what it really takes to make AI work for 1.5 billion people. Shalini, Tanvi, welcome to Interpreting India.
Thank you, Nidhi.
So let's just get right into it. Tell me a little bit about why you've decided to write about AI adoption rather than AI innovation, which seems to be the flavor that most people are chasing right now.
Yeah, interesting question, Nidhi. So see, AI innovation is about deep science, about technology shifts which have happened. And we all have seen that there was an AI winter, but now innovation in AI has accelerated exponentially. We have newer models, better GPUs. There's a lot of capital which has got poured into chips, data centers, and new models. While all that is necessary, but how AI gets built into systems and also with people is what we want to see. Believe me, AI adoption is hard. Building AI which can impact farmers, citizens, health workers, this is hard. And it's about science of AI which works, but also more importantly about AI that is useful and changes lives. We all know that AI breakthroughs are advancing rapidly. But the real value of AI emerges only when technologies are embedded in people's everyday lives and systems. And adoption is actually proving harder than invention. If you see the general purpose technologies like electricity, it took birth in Germany, but it was deployed, implemented in US with distribution systems, transition systems. And if that wouldn't have happened, electricity would have remained on the sidelines, right? It would have remained just a great invention. Similarly, for AI, adoption will remain on the sidelines if people and systems are not integrated. How you actually get work done with AI. So the constraint is not, it doesn't become just technological capability. It's about institutions and organizations who are preparing to absorb it. And each of them have their own distinct roles, their rules, their incentives, their standards, accountability structures. But if you have to integrate AI, then you have to think of newer behaviors, trusted organizations, and they also have to change workflows accordingly. And so our motivation was very simple. The constraints are shifting. It's not just the capability of AI, the innovation of AI that we need to focus on, but we have to focus on how institutions can absorb AI into real work and integrate AI reasoning with human decision making, and hence AI adoption.
Thanks, Shalini. That's a very interesting framework to look at this because you draw a fairly clear distinction between what just the research and the development of what we are now looking at as frontier AI development is versus what building AI for impact looks like and what that adoption looks like. So when I was looking at the UCAF framework, Tanvi, just coming to you, one of the terms that I really liked was pilot purgatory. Tell us a little bit about what this pilot purgatory is, and especially what it means in countries like India, where, like Shalini said, we're focusing on building AI for use cases, building AI for impact, rather than just looking at building AI for frontier models or the research and development for the sake of development?
Nidhi, so, pilot purgatory, we arrived on that after speaking to more than, I would say, 1,000 use case owners across sectors, across continents. And pilot purgatory, in very simple terms, is that frustrating middle state where you know you have an AI use case, you know you have a persona, purpose you're building for, but that AI initiative gets stalled, gets told, gets slowed, and doesn't really move beyond that controlled pilot, that controlled setting where you first deployed in. It doesn't achieve reliable scaled production. It doesn't see widespread sustainable adoption. And ultimately, see, if it doesn't see that kind of adoption, no impact happens. It really doesn't reach the last mile. It doesn't reach the persona it was built for. So pilot purgatory is that in-between state where you're stuck. And what we realized when we spoke to these use case owners was that, the simple question is, sure, you're stuck in this state, but why are you stuck here? What are the barriers that you are seeing? And we realized that there was a pattern emerging in the barriers that use case owners were seeing. And these were the barriers that, if answered, if designed for, would lead to adoption and ultimately impact. Now, when it comes to India, there are many, many diverse, unique, and very promising use cases getting built across sectors. In the article itself, we have identified 7 such sectors, which go all the way from education, agri to law and justice, and public services delivery, which is a big mandate for the government. They are highly prioritizing how AI could change public services delivery. And what we realized was that India is the AI use case capital, and could be, is a very promising candidate for being the AI use case capital of the world. But a lot of these use cases are just very piloty. They see that first deployment happen with the adopter or with a stakeholder, with an actor who could be a potential adopter. But not many systems are absorbing those pilots into their everyday mechanisms and workflows. So for us, the problem became, how do you start coming up with a pattern of barriers that India is seeing, firstly? So a great amount of our time actually went in understanding what are those high promising, high potential use cases that are coming out of India and what are the constraints for them. And just to highlight a few, the constraints were around voice, multilingual. Can we have access to data flows that actually matter to people, or that will help me create AI applications that matter to people? Could I get compute that works in low resource settings? How do I build for safeguards? How do I get funding beyond the first pilot, right? And these could be very sector specific or very geography specific. So we were definitely seeing common barriers emerged, which, if acted upon, would help with diffusion of the AI technology.
Thanks, Tanvi. I'm going to come back to the use case capital of the world, because I do think that framing it really helps contextualize the conversation we're having today. But I just want to go back to something that you talked about, and that was about how adoption suffers because of various reasons. We want to have a more on-ground conversation. Can you give us an example of what this sort of like fragmented or siloed adoption looks like? Like, what does that really look in practice when you look at different Indian states or different sectors during your research? Like on ground, if you could give us an example of this.
We have a few, right? So, for example, if you're building a legal AI use case in India, and let's say your target adopter are judicial courts as an institution, you need to design your AI use case such that it could work with the compute systems of those courts. Here, the problem is not getting access to cloud credits for developing that first pilot, but it's thinking through systemic compute that will need to be integrated with your AI use case, which the court will easily procure with, So that, for example, was a key barrier that we saw, and in fact is one of the enablers we have captured. The barrier is not getting access to compute. The barrier is getting access to the compute you need for your use case, which is affordable, accessible in the format you need. So that is one example. The second one is when you are making these use cases which are designed to speak to the last mile beneficiary. It could be a healthcare worker, it could be a farmer who is, let's say, seeking advisory using this AI use case. You have to realize that these people are semi-literate, are voice first, and don't always understand the risks of speaking to an AI bot on the other end. So here you have to think about safety, safeguards, evaluation and monitoring mechanisms from the start. And no one really knows the one answer, right? Because context is very important in this conversation. Safety means something very different when an enterprise is adopting a solution versus a farmer or a healthcare worker. So here again, the barrier became that safety was bolted on too late. And things like safeguards and benchmarks and evaluations, which should have been thought of from the get-go, were not prioritized by either use case owners or adopters or funders, right? So that's sort of the second thing. I think one thing we are realizing is that when it comes to adoption, it's very fragmented. There are only a few use cases that are truly seeing that large-scale implementation and adoption happen. And that fragmentation is not just technical, right? It's organizational. Do organizations really know how they should be adopting AI? And what all is required for that adoption to really turn into impact on the...
Thanks, Tanvi. That definitely gives us a very different perspective from just the we need more chips and more powerful compute to make AI happen conversation that we seem to be seeing a lot of today. Shalini, just coming to you, you've done a lot of research on this. You've talked to a lot of people on this, so many use cases. What are some barriers to AI adoption that you've seen that don't just fit into like this very straight narrative of you need more compute to make it happen? Like, what are some AI adoption barriers that people don't really expect, but it is something that we need to address if we want to see adoption at scale?
Yeah. So what happens is when we talk to people, the biggest barrier has been actually the mindset change and the behavior change. And it is not just that, let's go and adopt AI. It's also how AI is integrated into the institutional structure which are existing today. See, today, if you see a farmer and they want to find out what seeds to sow or what kind of crop they should, have in a cyclical form in their farm, they would rely a lot on agriculture scientists and their advisors, and those advisories are present in journals, in the research papers. Of course, the government makes a lot of effort to communicate it to the farmers. But if an AI bot is giving that advice, so the AI bot, is it by an institution? So should the farmer trust the institution, and is that institution ready to back up the advice which is given by the AI bot? The AI bot learns from different sources. So essentially, have you added existing workflows and the decisions which are being made? Will the institution also back it? It's not just the farmer accepting it. Farmer might actually take any of the advice given by the bot, but the institution also has to back it. So the safety, the reliability of the advice and the institution which is setting the clear standards and is accountable for that advice is really important. And this behavioral change which needs to bring in that, how the AI systems work with the humans, how is it learning with the inputs of the humans, that's a change which is needed. And once if these are not in place, then it's a big barrier for AI to get adopted, because people do not want uncertainty in their lives, right, to be added. So if AI is adding more uncertainty into the system, they will for sure reject it. And AI is rejected mostly for either fear or confusion or bias, or it just doesn't work for me. That's a feel people have. So whenever uncertainty is there, whenever liability is pushed onto individuals or to isolated teams, it would not work. AI will not happen. And responsibility definition of who owns what, how is the institutions play into that? What that needs a mindset change, that needs a capability to integrate AI into the existing workflows. Otherwise, use cases will still just remain as pilots. You will do a pilot, you'll be happy. Hey, I could, apply AI in this new workflow. It worked, but it will not scale. If it has to scale and it has to become something of a lasting value, and see the long tail of diffusion happen, then the barriers of mindset of integration into the existing flows, and accepting that behaviors will change, and what will the new behaviors look like, that part is something which we have to solve.
Thanks, Shalini. I think again that ties up into our conversation really well. Also brings me to the next point, which is what Tanvi already mentioned, which is India being the use case capital of the world. There's been a lot of conversation around that. Like you said, Shalini, if we want to make that happen, we do have to figure out this delta that exists between making a pilot and getting it adopted at a larger scale. So very, very sort of simply, and I do think that that's one of the purposes of the use case frameworks. Tanvi, just tell me very simply, what is a good use case? Like, how do we know that an AI use case is a good use case?
I think it's a tricky question because that is actually one thing we try to not do with the framework. So the framework doesn't try to evaluate how good or bad use cases are. But what it tries to say is that if you are pursuing a use case, how can you make it concrete such that you can almost have a practical definition for it, right? So a use case is, it's not about deploying a chatbot. It's not about buying a co-pilot. It's a little more than that. So a use case for us is a commitment to improve a specific outcome for a specific person in a specific context. And context is very important because we feel this is where AI really has the potential to explode as a general purpose technology for how much personalization it can really do. So in this situation, the persona is who uses the AI use case in the real world and what must be true for them to trust it, right? So it's about utility and it's about trust and accountability that the persona needs to have with the AI use case. So that's part one of the definition. Part two is what pain point is that AI use case trying to solve, right? So if there is a technology, if there is a solution, an application being built in the use case, what is that application trying to, solve? And the third piece, and I think this is where our definition is maybe a little different from how the world views it. The third piece is the technology layer or the application layer. For us, that is very important to capture in the use case, but it's not the first thing that you start with. It's the third sort of category of things that comes after you've captured the persona and the purpose that you get to the unique application that the use case owner is building out. Now, there's no strict definition for good or bad, but we do try to ask a few key questions when we are talking to use case owners or when we are coming up with these use case studies that we've tried to build out with this framework. And those questions are as such: where does AI add value in this person's life, on this or in this persona's workflow? What is that measurable improvement, if any, that it's doing? So that's sort of question number one. And question number two is, if something is to go wrong in the use case, who is the accountability lying with? Because many a times people build out applications and chatbots, but as Shalini was also mentioning, adoption of any solution requires you to trust in that solution for you to know who's accountable if something is to go wrong. So for us, a good use case has components of measurable improvement and then clear accountability in case someone's going wrong. If these two aspects plus the persona, purpose, application is captured, we call that use case concrete.
Thank you, Tanvi. I must admit, I'm a little disappointed that we don't have a magic answer for what will be a great use case that will definitely scale. But this does make a lot more sense to contextualize it in terms of how do you ensure that it's going to be a concrete and complete use case. Since we have to do work on this anyway, now Shalini, I'll come to you. Tell us a little bit about how do you look at these use cases. So in the framework, you talk about horizontal enablers, which are data, language, voice, workforce, and guardrails. What does this really mean? And can you just explain it to us with an example of what does this look like when you're looking at the use case?
Sure, sure. So let's first discuss that why do we have these horizontal enablers? Why did we choose them? How do they help? And then we'll come to what they mean. So in our discoveries, we understood that the horizontal unlocks are required for scale. Pilots which are stuck and they are unable to go to scale. And we said, okay, let's figure out why are pilots not scaling. Now, think about a pilot which has happened, say, in Marathi language in Maharashtra, and the builder or the builder of the use case wants to take it to Telangana, or they want to take it to Africa. The language changes, and a lot of their learning, their data, their information, and how they have constructed it changes, because the language nuances itself make it very difficult for them to start from scratch. Now, if they would have thought about that their use case would be multilingual in nature, and then they would have maybe chosen a vendor or maybe chosen an architecture which makes them very easy to replicate into language. And also they might have to partner. Say, for example, they don't know about the Africa language. They are just an Indian-based use case developer, and they want to expand. So when they go to Africa, they don't know whom to network with or whom to partner with for the African languages. So language becomes an important part when you have to scale. Many times safety is not built in, right? And safety could be in conversational. It could be, are you, having a conversation with a chatbot, and then, it goes all over, and you are not able to steer it into the actual motive and purpose of the use case. Many times it happens that farmers are unable to use a particular AI application because the data which was fed into the AI application, it was not clean or not ready to be used, or the actual advisory or the actual information which the farmer might need, it's sitting in PDFs and it is not AI ready at all. So these are the challenges why AI takes longer to get implemented. While you might have compute, while you might have the models existing, but you have to think about the data where the actual information is existing, and that's what is of use either to the farmer or to the health worker or to the paralegal who's working on a legal case. So we have to build AI with these issues in mind. And that's the reason why we chose the horizontal enablers of data, language, voice, workforce optimization, and guardrails. Now we have to understand that why the specifics of each one of them. And AI as a science needs to be developed in each one of them. And plus the use cases give feedback, which makes the science of AI for these areas even better. For example, in voice, not many people can use only textual phones or laptops or API calls and get information out of and have it on their apps. Voice is a mechanism if we have to really go towards the have to bridge the digital divide, which is there, and not make AI also add to the digital divide. So the science to make these enablers happen means that you need to have strong voice models, representative of culture, representative of the language. And this needs actually researchers and scientists to work on the nuances of, say, a tur dal or a tur dal, or nuances of how my voice has emotion, and aam might mean a mango or it might mean a common man, right? It has both the meanings. So the contextuality has to be there. The fairness of a response in a voice also needs to be measured. So there is a good amount of research science needed just to make one aspect or one horizontal enabler possible. and the similar things on on guardrails and safety and understanding the data readiness of the infrastructure. There are so many PDFs with which are not AI ready. There are so much of contextual information existing in our systems, in our minds, in our people, which needs to be all put together. So these 5 areas are what we have taken. And if we take it in the right manner, then of course, systems can be put in place. And for example, AI for Bharat has worked so much to put together the voice models in place. And Bhashini as a system, as a DPI by the government, is making it possible that various government departments can accept it, embed it, include translations, transliteration, everything into their own systems as such. So to build the science as well as organizational institutional capability for every horizontal enabler is something which is needed for the use case to develop. And we took these 5 because we saw that most of the pilots are stalling or not happening because our research showed that these are the areas which always come up. And we took it and made them part of their framework. I'm sure I hope these examples are making it, this explanation itself is making it apparent that what they mean, what voice means, what data means.
Thank you, Shalini. And I think just drawing on this, can we have another example, Tanvi, perhaps if you can come in, that just explains what your framework does from beginning to end? Because we do have a non-technical audience, and I do think it's important to get to them as well. So just one use case you've worked with and how you've sort of maybe gone through it to see that it's complete and it's contextual, what that process looks like.
Absolutely. So let me do a deep dive into one such use case. This use case is called Mahavistar, and covering the 3 practical components of a use case. So Mahavistar is designed for farmers in Maharashtra who are seeking comprehensive advisory across market prices, government schemes, weather data, agricultural research data, banks, warehouses information. So the pain point that Mahavistar is currently trying to solve is the pain point that today it's not easy to have comprehensive advisory accessible to you on your $20 feature phone that a lot of these farmers have in their language. Mahavistar in itself is an AI-powered multilingual voice-based assistant that's working. It's accessible through application voice telephony, which is a key component because it solves for the fact that farmers like to speak in their language, and also it's available through browser and widgets. Now, Mahavistar was launched in May 2025 in Maharashtra. And some statistics there is it's seen more than 1.7 million downloads of the app. More than 300,000 unique users have used the platform. There have been more than 1.5 million farmer queries that have come through on that. The beauty is that it's capturing comprehensive advisory for more than 50 plus crops in Maharashtra alone. And the general feedback that's been received for the platform is highly positive. It's 97.3% is positive feedback on it. And there have been many, about 700,000 sessions that have happened on the platform, which basically supports the fact that it's an AI use case, obviously under wide-scale implementation, that's been taken up by the state government of Maharashtra, the Department of Agriculture, and it's slowly reaching out to more and more farmers. Please, just to capture the scale of it, if you're saying there are currently 300,000 unique users on the platform, Maharashtra alone has 15 million cultivators and farmers. So there is a huge opportunity to serve, this category of population which is seeking and, seeing a major pain point. Mahavistar is one such implementation. It's already going to other states of India and other countries. So, for example, Bharat Vistar will be launched soon. The Ethiopian implementation in Africa will be launched actually in a couple of weeks in line with the AI Unpack Summit that's happening in India. So it's spreading to more and more states, about 4 to 5 more states in India and about 3 countries in Africa already And it's only been 8 to 9 months since it first launched in Maharashtra. Now that's the use case. But when you start studying the adoption patterns of Mahavistar, what we realized was that obviously it was a very cool innovation and invention. But there were certain diffusion patterns, certain horizontal enablers that they had focused on, which helped them reach the number of users that they've already reached. I'm going to capture some of these enablers. So starting with compute, right? They focus on compute and they'll be working closely with NVIDIA and the India AI mission because they realized early on that compute which enables real-time low latency advisory is important. Number two, they said that if we are to actually answer the question, we need to use large language models that work well with the cultural context of the Maharashtrian farmers. So they have looked at technology partners who focus on frontier models. Number three, a key component, a key enabler for any advisory use case is the data and the data flows it's enabled. So they have spent a lot of time just thinking through which data sources do they need to connect to. Who's sitting in the public sector within the government, who's sitting in the market, who's sitting within research and academia, who's sitting in the finance sector like banks, which give credit to farmers. And this is not 1, 2, 3, 4 sources. This is information across 500 plus data sources. The number of schemes itself is across 40 plus schemes. So data becomes the third enabler here. Then they said, okay, if the key feature of this use case is voice and multilingual, then we need to work with Bharashni and AI for Bharat very closely, who have focused on this as a capability, right? And have created models and services which could enable rapid adoption of this app. They also thought about institutionalization early on. A key part of this is once the AI use case is ready so that it can go into the field, what kind of workforces need to get upskilled and reimagined? How do you create those extension teams, which in case farmers have nuanced queries are ready to go once this advisory is rolled out? And a key enabler for Mahavistar has ended up being this kind of organizational institutionalization that has happened with the state of Maharashtra and specifically the Department of Agriculture, which is not just an implementation partner, but they're also a funder of the program. So they have impetus and incentive to make this work. The fourth enabler is around talent availability who can design the product and the program. And this has come from various parties, EkStep, the Center for Open Societal Systems, COSS being the second one, and many others who have contributed both human resources, but a lot of advisory bandwidth to this to bring in best practices from the TPI journey that has happened. Another enabler which has been very key is safeguards. So when you're creating an advisory for farmers, you have to think of benchmarks evaluations early on. And this is where I think Mahavistar has done a beautiful job of thinking through who in the academic world of India could do deep science, deep research, and create safeguards which make sense for the agricultural context that Mahavistar is functioning in. And lastly, one key enabler, which I think is talked about, but sometimes only for the first pilot, is funding. So Mahavistar also did a great job of thinking about funding, not just for the first pilot, but for this large-scale implementation. It currently has 4 funders, the state of Maharashtra, Gates, EkStep, and one more. The whole point here is that many, many different types of institutions have invested in such an implementation and are working together to make it work. So this is one such example where we are actually seeing a use case creating some impact on the field. For a beneficiary who had a very clear pain point, and this has gone beyond that first deployment. It's gone into some scale or some amount of sustained adoption of the platform.
Thank you, Tanvi. I think that really exemplifies and explains to a large detail what the use case adoption framework is and how you all are really looking at how this can take something from pilot to population scale. It was so nice to hear about the use case adoption framework, but I also want to just really quickly, as we come towards the end, take a look forward. So this feels like a very job interview question, but Shalini, Tanvi, Where do you see AI adoption in India 5 years from now?
So, in AI world, they say that, 3 years is also like a very, very long time because things change on a weekly basis. And we wake up every morning and, there is enough changes in innovation adoption which have happened, which make you sit up. Having said that, I think the one big shift that I would like to see is that actually India stops measuring progress by how many pilots we run to measure progress by how many use cases are reliably in production and across verticals. Like the use case first approach, which we talk about in our UCAF, the unit of progress should be converted use cases and not demos. Now, adoption by 1.5 billion people is not easy to have, right? It does take time, and that's where I think your question is very valid, that it might definitely take 5 years if you want to understand and build in and like the digital infrastructure was built in India. But I see a lot of changes happening in the vertical sectors itself. Today, how agriculture is done, and that's what was explained by Tanvi of the Mahavistar project that we have. Agriculture itself is changing. How advisory is taken, how decisions are made, how livelihoods are impacted, how animal husbandry can be done, how cattle can be treated, and eventually how money comes into the pockets of the farmer. That itself will change. There is a lot of discussion on jobs being changed, but more than that is how the roles of the work being done by people changes. The whole workforce optimization says that today, how do I work with AI, along with AI? And that is a change which will happen when nurses in hospitals are navigating on human decisions and decisions by machines, and interlocking both of them together to give a combined answer to a patient. Life changes. How data is unlocked in multiple sectors and they come together, and a new data economy happens just because the data is unlocked. Is AI ready? That's a change. Because we have seen that, just how the fintech industry opened up and new data with mobile phones coming in, and there is so much of payments, mobile, triangulation, which happened, which opened up a new economy. And imagine data being opened across all the sectors, being available for private, public players to triangulate, to get insights, and start and create absolutely new businesses. Think about an MSME who's like owning a small business in a tier 4 city and is wanting to export to say Poland, and the amount of possibilities it could be, because it could act and ask a chatbot exactly of the scheme which they benefit it from, and find out where they can export their material to. I mean, this needs a lot of data sets to come together. A lot of voice models will be in place in the next few years, which is going to make the way you are typing queries, you might actually be talking to bots, which makes sense, not the bots which we are struggling with today. People will change because their jobs have changed, their mechanisms have changed, their interaction models have changed. But in all this, the inclusivity of people, the inclusivity of different sects of society, of culture, is really important. And if we do this well, adoption will compound. Each deployment is going to leave behind reusable assets. It could be simple evaluation benchmarks for, say, low resource languages. See, today all our benchmarks are what are given by the big tech, but we create benchmarks which are for the benefit of the society, and which could be about, say, edges at the devices at the edge, or there could be new data readiness architectures, new training modules. So the next deployments become faster and safer. And that's a long tail of adoption, that something which takes you months to make and then weeks to make and can be done in days, simply because the know-how is, you can spread, it is available, it is transferable, it is interoperable. And as Nandan Nilikeni says, that AI will change India and India will change AI. because India, being the use case capital of the world, can bring the use cases which can change the direction of AI itself. So, of course, my optimistic view is India becomes a place where population scale adoption is repeatable, not just because we have more pilots, but because we have more shared adoption infrastructure. And that's what the vision is for the next 5 years.
Thank you, Shalini. It's nice to see some optimism about AI adoption, because it does feel like a lot of the conversation around AI has become a bit more pessimistic. So just as we close, just what is the reason for the optimism? Like, what is one factor that makes you think that we're moving from the AI stuck society that we currently are in to something that will actually diffuse at scale? Like, really quickly, if you can tell me like the one thing that really makes you positive that this is going to work.
Yeah, and I'll quote Shankar Marwara here, the CEO of EkStep, and he's he very clearly says that diffusion is often misunderstood as a question of speed. In reality, it's a question of learning, of capability and application of the technology across sectors. So learn and grow. And organizations learn only when they use it. If there's no usage, actually there is no learning. Also in this diffusion, there is this concept of race. We have heard of race to the top, race to the bottom. So the race to the bottom is all about AI adoption. For the wrong usage, but race to the top is about the safe usage. So when we say usage, it is about safe usage, because that is going to improve AI and diffuse it even better. An application across sectors. I mean, what is that we can repeat across sectors? What is usable? It's very, if you think agriculture and legal or healthcare, they're three very different sectors. But what's reusable? Maybe the data architectures, the mechanism, maybe the way the voice is used. The voice model might change with the data of each one of them, but the benchmarks might be very similar. So the next phase of AI competition will not be decided by who builds the most powerful models, but it will be shaped by societies who build institutions, absorb uncertainty, and absorb technology into daily work. And that's the race for the destination and the winner. And that's the race we want to be, we want to ask people to look at that, look at the economic impact of diffusion, look about how organizations carry the diffusion forward and shape the rules, the trust of where it succeeds. So the change happens with the whole organizations coming together, institutions coming together and creating that safe, repeatable and trusted AI. And in fact, some of the most valuable AI systems, they'll not look dramatic. They'll be very ordinary, very ordinary. They'll fade routine decisions and familiar processes. New will come in and we'll not even realize. We'll not even come to know that we have used AI and it has happened in our lives. And it is so smooth, so fine, and so beautiful. And so embedded they are that we'll forget that we have used AI in the process. Tanvi, do you have anything to add?
Exactly what you said, Shani. It's the fact that we are seeing some of these implementations already happen across sectors, which makes us optimistic. And what we are seeing about these implementations are that they're trying to be ordinary. They're not trying to stand out, because if you try to stand out, you become a side screen on someone's laptop. You're fine for that first demo pilot, but you don't really become embedded into their life. And we're seeing some early examples of this already happen, which makes us think that diffusion is possible. And maybe there is a methodology that would enable more and more of this diffusion. The only second thing I would like to add is that this diffusion, I mean, a key trend that we are seeing is that diffusion happens when there are networks of collaboration that come together. And these networks are very specific to maybe a use case type that you're in, or a sector you're in, or a geography you're in. And if we are to really think about diffusion, and if these networks are already forming, and as we know, there's already so much investment happening on the innovation side, maybe it's a matter of coordinating programs where more and more of these networks can take place, can join together, such that supply meets demand being the use case and ultimately the beneficiary who gets impacted, but maybe a lot more coordination can happen in this very fragmented ecosystem, in the next 3 to 5 years.
Thank you, Tanvi. I think building ordinary AI for scale and impact is probably the most positive note that we can end with. So I would just like to say, Shalini, Tanvi, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing these insights on what it really takes to move AI from pilots to practice. This conversation that we've been having about adoption, use cases, and building the right infrastructure feels really critical right now as India positions itself at the center of this global conversation. So I really appreciate that you've taken the time to come here and talk to us and our listeners. For our listeners, if you want to learn more about the use case adoption framework, please check out their article on AI adoption journey for population scale on the Carnegie India website. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. To make sure you don't miss it, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts from. To learn more about our research and team, you can visit us at carnegieindia.org. You can also find us on social media on X, Facebook, and Instagram. Thank you for listening. See you next time.